When does a joke become a dad joke? Hi, I'm Angel, and this is the Authentic Action Podcast. Welcome to today's episode where I'm going to talk about, are we shifting consciousness individually or collectively? This is a topic that, it's just been at least a few thousand years that humans have been contemplating consciousness. I don't know if we're any closer today than we were a few thousand years ago, but we certainly have more and more data to consider. Um, I work with some large language models, aka AI, and so I'm constantly contemplating this idea of what makes us conscious, what's the distinction. Um, are the humans around me even conscious? Because they don't seem that conscious a lot of the times. And when I say they, I mean also me. Um, yeah, I think throughout human history, there have been examples. Jesus and Buddha come to mind, but certainly there have been others. Nelson Mandela comes to mind, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, people who have seem to achieve a higher level of consciousness where they're able to um, be present in the moment. Ram Dass, Alan Watts, some of my favorite more modern philosophers. Um, but I think all of those, including probably Buddha and Jesus from the stories that I've heard, to whatever degree you even take those stories to be true figures at some point. They certainly seemed like fallible humans, just like all the rest of us. And I do think, though, that the reason I bring up these potentially exceptional stories is that my perception is that this quest to achieve enlightenment or awakening or cease suffering, more specifically, is something that many of us have like dabbled in. Some of us have gone pretty full into, and only a far fewer have really achieved some level that they felt like was success. Now, I want to say I could be totally wrong about that. And my perception of that has changed throughout my life. And I would be surprised if it doesn't continue to change. So take that with whatever grains of salt and sugar that you need to make that work for you. Really, I guess the point of me saying that is that I am not here to say that I have it all figured out or that I think I know the answer, so much as to say that I think we are all in this mystery together, and that in my own lifelong journey to explore the potentials of that answer, I have over and over again run into that expanding mystery and like layers of an onion peeling away, um, maybe gaining another level of consciousness and then seeing that there's another level of unconsciousness that I'm hiding from myself in that. So, um, being a lifelong philosopher and reader of many other philosophers' works, I can say with a pretty high level of confidence that the only thing we really know is that we don't know a lot when it comes to understanding consciousness and even things like dad jokes or history. That dad joke, which by the way I will give you the very silly punchline at the end, which is actually a little bit probably sexist or something, but I like inappropriate jokes, so if you don't like them, you've been forewarned. Click off before the end of this. um if you're curious, which I hope you are, because I think curiosity might save the cat, and it might, or kill the cat. It might save us all. That's what I was trying to get to. Botched that one pretty good, didn't I? Um the point again that I wanted to talk about is that we don't really know what consciousness is. We don't really have an agreed upon definition. We keep talking about it at every wave of human history that you can look at. There's all these different lenses, and currently we're looking at it through this lens of artificial intelligence and intelligence broadly speaking, and what is consciousness. And I hear a lot of humans pushing back against the AI, and robotics, and saying they don't have a soul and they're not conscious. And I agree with a lot of that rhetoric, but I also question how many of my fellow humans are conscious, to what degree, and do we have souls, and like, what is that? To me, I love Carl Jung talks about the soul as, oh, I'm going to get this incorrectly. I apologize in advance. I just remember liking the way that he put that. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even think it was Carl Jung. I think it's James Hollis's work following up some of Jung's work. But he talks about soul as related to what I think I'm talking about now of consciousness. So our ability to reflect on our own awareness. And I think there's an aspect of energy, spirit in that. Like, um, if I say that music has got soul, that means it's got like some heart, some kind of magic energy, a spark in it, right? That seems to transcend the linear logic of like our left brain. That would be over here, depending on which way you're looking. Uh, yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so I'm gonna pause there, put a little pause button on that whole left brain, right brain aspect, even though it is very related to the broader picture that I'm thinking about with regards to consciousness, because um, it's the ability to reflect one side, to reflect on the other, and to bring those reflections like together into focus, which I think brings me to the highest levels that I've experienced so far of what I would call consciousness. How's that for vagueness? Anyway, let me back up and say I think there have been individual examples in our human history, throughout our human history, of individuals who have achieved a higher level of consciousness in which they are able to consistently feel better more of the time, like hold that higher, more blissful state, which many of us have dabbled in various, addictions, drugs, alcohol. That's the same thing to me. Love, I'm finding, is a big there's all these ways that we create a chemical cascade in our own bodies to try to circumvent suffering, basically, we could broadly say. And then some individuals teach about meditation and breathing, and there's been religious factions. I'm big into body work, somatics, dance, ecstatic dancing. There's other ways besides me eating cupcakes and, smoking crack that can create a really good feeling chemical cascade in the body, which, unlike smoking crack and eating cupcakes, could be more sustainable and less harmful to your body, like breath work, meditation, tantric exercises, perhaps. Now, like when I say tantric exercises, I think it's important to recognize that anything can be taken to an extreme, sort of taken out of the broader context of the present moment, and then lose that magic spark and eventually become toxic, become stagnant, or become excessive, or too much steeped in that mindset of lack. There's all these different ways that we humans can quickly get out of balance. And if you read a lot of philosophy, as many of us have, then you are already quite aware of how this has been part of the human struggle for a very long time and seems to be very pervasive in our culture. And I've been working on a book. I've mentioned it before and I want to mention it again. I was hoping to be done right now, actually, but I'm still working on it. I've been working on it for a few years. It's called The Shift. It's my working title. And the subtitle, working subtitle is Own Your Emotions, Own Your Life. And the reason I started on that is because I see this crisis of a sorts in myself and more broadly speaking in our culture, especially since the pandemic lockdowns. But really, I keep reflecting on how it really was pretty prevalent before that. And um, my perception is that that we're sort of collectively stuck in a spiral of less and less consciousness and more anxiety because as we go more and more into that what we could call the left hemisphere, like more and more out of balance with that internal relationship that we all could be having more holistically, I feel like. Um, we seem to be shifting, and again, I'm hesitant because it's hard to put into words exactly, there's a lot of nuances to it, but I'm going to just speak to it grossly and see if I can get through it, which is to say that I think collectively we've been leaning more over toward that more linear, logical, trying like like I will say too far over to that um, logical, linear, what we're thinking of as the scientific method, but it's gotten all convoluted and fooling itself and defeating its own purpose, sort of a problem to the whole thing. Um, and in our quest to become to understand consciousness, we've sort of rationalized ourselves right away from consciousness, it feels to me a lot of times. So in my quest to help people regulate emotions and figure out how to um, get myself back into alignment with this healer aspect of myself, which I've spent a great deal of my lifetime cultivating. Um, I found myself askew, like many of us have been, and in my journey to bring myself back into balance, have been reminded that even though there are many great tools like I mentioned, like meditation and breathing and movement and tapping, drumming. And again, these are great tools. That's part of what I'm including in my book. And they are ways into this healing process. But when I really try to get at the bottom of or at the heart of the core of where this shift comes from, where does this healing spark? What is that stuff, that soul, that essence, that spark, that special thing that shifts us from that downward spiral into that almost or sometimes very miraculous feeling healing spiral that I certainly know very well. And I think actually that most of us know, if we're really honest with ourselves and each other, that we all, I think as children, we know it very well, very inherently. And then as adults, we program ourselves away from that belief and into what we might call that dream, um, which in that in that illusion, that dream where we're actually living out of alignment with our true nature, with our true selves, we start to feel disconnected from that, and we don't feel that natural love that we even have for ourselves. And in that sense of disconnection, it starts to like create a reverberation of a fractured image or a fractured reflection. And instead of repeating like the lessons that we need to learn and the good things, we can spiral into this negative, the pit of despair, as we could call it. It's been called. I don't know if I'm making sense here. I'm aware that I'm circling something. I'm trying to get at something with words, which is actually beyond words. So I'm gonna back up like a monster truck and take another run at this mountain a little bit and say, again, that I think there have been many traditional schools of teaching and thought which get caught up in the thought or the teaching, the words, the linear aspect of trying to say, here's how you do it. And I have done this myself in my attempt to write this book, and I'm still doing it. And I'm still gonna write this book, but I'm babbling about it a little bit because I'm right, in the heart of trying to finish this book up and click together what I feel like is a very essential element, which is the symbolic, the more right-brained, what's often called gestalt or feminine or feeling oriented. And this is related to why my subtitle is Own Your Emotions, Own Your Life, because I feel like in this logical quest to be dysregulated, less dysregulated and more re-regulated, there's a tendency to suppress and repress our emotions, our feelings. And it makes sense, it's logical, and it ends up killing that spark of creativity that we have that's really might be the most beautiful, wonderful aspect of being a human, that thing that we might call consciousness or soul. And so the reason I'm so feeling so passionate about it is that I feel like in the midst of all this extra anxiety, pardon me, I'm bouncing my camera around there. As we're coming more and more into this age of anxiety producing media and just bombarded constantly with things wanting to grab our attention and reduce our ability to stay conscious in the moment, at the same time there's this opportunity opening up. So there's like in that yin yang style of the way the universe operates, at the very height of the chaos and distraction and dysregulation is the seed of calmness, of letting go of all that thought and coming into the present moment and that feeling. One of my favorite techniques for getting to it is to imagine that you're holding a piece of citrus fruit and you're smelling that mandarin or that lemon or that orange, and it's filling your senses. You smell the pungency of it. You smell the sunshine of it. It's literally turned sunshine and dirt and rain into this piece of fruit. And you can smell that and you can take it into your body and you can bite it and you can feel the pungency of it and the acridness of the peel and the sweetness of the fruit inside start to permeate your own senses. And in a moment like that, it's like you reset your nervous system. You remember that you're connected to this beautiful, amazing thing called the present moment life. Pardon me. And the more we can teach ourselves to respond to the temptation to tamp down our ability to feel life, to really experience life viscerally by, you know, just tamping that down with programming, with drugs and alcohol, with probably most disturbingly and prevalently negative self-limiting thoughts. So, back to that consciousness piece that I tried to start with, there's numerous examples that come to mind. One is like if you want to train an elephant for the circus, you tie it up when it's very young, and when it gets to be a grown elephant, it won't try to get away generally because it will have been trained into its body to not try to pull away. And you can just tie it up to a post that it could easily pull up, but it doesn't try to pull it up because when it was younger, maybe it tried and it failed. And so then it becomes programmed to not try to pull away. And we're very much like that ourselves. We become programmed by society, by our beliefs early on, and then we don't even try so many of the things we could do. And similarly, there's called the flea experiment, where if you put a bunch of fleas in a jar and they will try to jump out. So you put a lid on that jar, and within just a short amount of time, I forget the time span, but after a while, those fleas will have jumped and hit the top of the lid and stop jumping as high, basically. And then you can take the lid off, and no fleas will jump out. They'll just keep jumping right under that lid. And also, similarly, there's a story called The Tiger and the Goats, where a tiger gets gets killed. Trying to remember how the story starts. Suddenly that made sense. Doesn't make sense, but um, somehow a tiger gets killed amidst some goats right as it's giving birth. And so this baby tiger cub gets born into this herd of goats. And the goats, being compassionate creatures, even though the mother tiger was trying to kill them, um, take pity on this baby cub. Babies are so cute. And nurse this cub. And so this cub, this baby tiger, grows up believing that it's a goat and associated with, the goats, and that's its goat's family. And but it's actually a tiger and it has some tiger instincts. And so eventually another tiger comes along, a grown tiger, and it's like, what are you doing, tiger, hanging out with these goats? And the tiger's like, no, I'm not a tiger, I'm a goat. And the tiger's like, no, you're actually a tiger, you silly tiger, not a goat. And so the tiger takes the other younger tiger over to a pond and shows it its reflection. And then the tiger is still like, no, no, no. I don't really understand, but all I know is that this is my family. This is like my mother, this goat, and so I must be a goat. And then the older tiger says, come with me, young tiger, and takes it to a den and where it has some meat. And the younger tiger it's only eaten grass and goat's milk because thinks it's a goat. And so, but then the older tiger gives the younger tiger some meat. And as soon as the meat gets into the tiger's body, it activates the tiger's natural DNA, the nature, its tiger nature, and it roars, a tiny little roar at first, but it's at that moment, and it still takes some time after that for that tiger to realize and deal with the fact that it's been raised as a goat and it's kind of all twisted up. But that first little roar after it eats the piece of meat is described in this parable as that critical moment, that shift that I'm trying to get at. And again, it's hard to get at because it's really something, it's a spark that's beyond words. It's a spark where you remember your true nature. It's a spark where you remember who and what you really are. It's a spark when you remember you're a tiger, and even though you've been living as a goat all this time, you're still a tiger. No matter how much you eat grass and pretend to be weaker than you really are, you, my fellow human, are far, far greater than we've been acting. Most of us are mostly unconscious most of the time. To try to wrap this into where I started is I think that we're missing a huge part of our potential. And I'm not sure whether there's this collective evolutionary process going on that we're all going to collectively reach another, like a higher state of consciousness together. And maybe be it like maybe telepathy is going to be a thing. Maybe we are collectively going to reach a higher state of consciousness, if not all, almost all, that hundredth monkey kind of theory. Maybe we're all individually working on it. Because I can look at human history like at the times of Buddha and Jesus and some other figures, and then see how now we're at this time because of the internet, because of AI, because of things like this podcast, where we can share information more and more instantaneously, more and more at will, collectively, off the cuff, like I'm doing now, just speaking to you from my consciousness. I have some notes in front of me, but I don't have a script. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. I didn't have any of this yesterday, and there's a very good chance that where I'm at with this today will be irrelevant and outdated by tomorrow. That's the speed with which we are now collectively able to share and start to try to evolve our consciousness. So I think there's a good chance that we are collectively evolving. And I also think that when I look at human history, there's many, many examples of individuals thinking exactly this way and then finding out that the timing of things might be a lot different than any one of us thinks, and that like sort of like in Narnia or the way that it's described in between lifetimes, there's this distortion of time such that what takes, a day or 1,000 years is sort of the same thing geologically speaking, right? So even if it is eminent, it might still be many generations or lifetimes from now, or it might have already, if you look at the the quantum nature of the universe and realize that really there's only ever one moment now, and you might be able to conceive of the idea of collapsing all timelines into just the present moment, and then see that as we tell ourselves this story of expanding consciousness and awareness, it has already happened. It's already happening and happened. That might be too far out for some of you. I hope not. I hope that you're able to follow that. I think even though I have done my fair share of psychedelics in this lifetime, I haven't done any in quite a long time. So I want to assure you I'm not in any kind of, well, I've had some coffee today, but I'm not in any, what most people would consider an inebriated state. In fact, it's been over a year since I drank any alcohol, other than like some alcohol-based tinctures, or some kombucha. Anyway, again, then I think I bring that up because there's just so many subtle nuances to all of this. And I really don't think there's one way that's the answer, or, one thing that we should all be doing or not be doing. I really think it's about becoming more conscious, more present to ourselves in this moment. A good friend of mine just today asked me for my input about health because he's struggling. He's in his 50s, maybe even 60s, and like so many of us, struggling with chronic inflammation and frustrated that our current system doesn't really consider our whole bodies and just has all these sort of half answers or things that might make things worse in the long run. And so we've known each other a long time, and I appreciated that he asked me for my perspective on some issues he's going through. And it just, I found myself saying, really, I wish I had I know you want just a pill for an answer, or a one tool, one method. And if I could give you one, it would be to develop a healthy, loving relationship with yourself, to show up every day and try to be conscious of your own existence and loving toward yourself. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some patience, give yourself some love. And as we all learn to do that as individuals, I think that reverberates into the collective. And if there is a collective transcendence going on, a collective evolution toward a new level of consciousness going on, I think the way that we will get to it is through the individual transcendent, like at least where I'm at right now is how I feel. And I try to think about how to help people, and I want to help people. It's in my nature. From what I understand, it's in many, if not all of our natures, but it's certainly in my nature. And I love it when people like my friend remind me of that nature by asking me for my perspective and letting me know that they have noticed that I've spent this lifetime studying how to heal because of my own suffering. And I think that's such a commonly beautiful place that, when I think about all the teachers that I've had, what has made them credible teachers is that they have gone through their own dark nights of the soul, so to speak, their own suffering. And I think, as I've been writing this book, The Shift, and really thinking about what I have to offer you, dear reader and listener, as I try to package it in a way that you might access. It is this, it is the reassurance that I too have suffered and probably will still suffer, and I too have healed and will heal. And I have a trust that's with me most of the time, that if I can find that in myself, you can find that in yourself. And if you and I can find that in ourselves, then there's hope for the whole collective to find that. And I don't want to fight you about it, although I would love to talk to you about it. Um, yeah, but I do want to tell that story, and I want us to repeat that story in many different voices, in many different languages, in many different ways. Huh. I just thought of Jack White. Say the same damn thing on the violin. I'm a musician, and so I was just talking to one of my dear musician friends recently about how important it is to keep music, rhythm, dancing, comedy, laughter, these healing modalities that we humans have long cultivated in our various cultures, and that it's up to all of us. It's like holding the ember of the fire, of that spark. On the one hand, it's almost inevitable that nature will prevail and that spark will rekindle itself almost. And on the other hand, it's not. It's so delicate, and it depends on all of us. It's up to each of us to keep it alive, to hold space for it when we can, to lift each other up when we see one another struggling, to keep that alive in ourselves. Um, Makes me want to tear up a little bit because it's just so precious, and it's so rich with feeling. It's like it's the opposite of suppressing, of repressing, of not feeling. It's so delicious. It will make you cry. Um, and I know you know what I mean. I think we've all felt that, what it is to be alive. It's such a beautiful capacity that we have. So I guess I want to start to wrap this up, and I want to encourage you to just, you know, let somebody know, let another human being know in your life that you are human too, that you have feelings. If you can, tell them what your feelings are. If you have a friend that you want to say, hey, I just want to say I feel you. Maybe that's enough or all you can do or the perfect amount. Maybe you want to say, as I said to a friend recently, hey, you know how I said that thing earlier? That was kind of shitty. And what I meant to say is thanks for being a good friend. I think if we all can start to do more of that, this world gets better quickly. And we peel off another layer of that onion and become a little more conscious, at least as individuals, maybe as a collective. It's hard to know for sure because the individual's perspective, that's part of the point, I think, that I'm trying to get at is that both we need to do the work as individuals and we also need to share that work with each other because it's through that sharing, through that reflection that it really gains meaning, that it really like reverberates, ripples through us all and gains so much more of its own capacity. It becomes so much more meaningful when we share our reflections of our own consciousness, of our own growth, than when I mean, I think, again, it's both and it's not, you really can't have one without the other. Um, and without both, you have neither. So, yeah, I think it's important to recognize that we are in a time in our human history when there is a lot of anxiety, there is a lot of dysregulation, there is a lot coming at us that would lead us to disassociate and suppress our emotions and just not want to feel as much because it's too intense and we don't know how to hold ourselves and each other through that intensity. I get that. I understand it. It overwhelms me frequently. But there are tools we can learn. I'm here learning and teaching. And in my own journey of learning and teaching, I run into others who are learning and teaching. And if you're hearing this, I know you're learning and teaching as well. And so try to remember that, if it feels overwhelming, or it feels hopeless, or you're tempted to just give in to that hate, that unconsciousness, that beating the drum of, well, everybody else is doing it, so what's the use? What's the point? We might as well just um, check out. It's okay if that happens. It happens to most or all of us. But it's never any time like the present, as they say, to just flip the switch, turn it around, change your mind, really just become more present, literally just like that. Decide, hey, you know what? I actually do love myself. Hey, you know what? I actually don't want to beat myself up anymore. And I know that we're connected, so I don't want to beat you up and I don't want to beat me up. Hey, you know what? Actually, it's like waking up from a dream and go like, oh, wait a second. I was trapped in an illusion. And actually, I love you. I love me and I love you. And I want us to be able to share our different perspectives so that we can gain more awareness all together in sharing it. And just because we see things differently doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong. It means that we're beautifully different, that we have different perspectives. That's such a wonderful, amazing part of this dynamic life. And yeah, I think it's easy to forget that and easy to remember it. So I hope that I have helped you remember it at least for an instant. And I've certainly helped myself remember it for a few instances just in this conversation or this monologue, as the case really is. So thank you for being out there in my imagination, if nothing else, and giving me a space to reflect towards. And especially thank you if you do take the time to like or subscribe or leave me a comment. Show me a sign that you're out there as another being and that you feel me, that you hear me, that some of what I'm saying is resonating and landing. And let me know if you think maybe you think no, we're not collectively evolving. Maybe you think we are. Maybe you think you are, or you're not. Maybe you think I am not, or I am. I'm interested in all of that. I'm interested in your perspective. Um, I'm interested in sharing my perspective, and I'm interested in encouraging you to share your perspective. I think um, yeah, I think collectively we could be in for an amazing new time in our evolutionary process. And I think that individually, I'm ready for that in my own life. And so I am excited about the ways that I see that unfolding in my own life. And if you're excited about the ways that you see that unfolding in your own life and you share that with me, then we will exponentially grow that just even just a little bit, maybe a lot. That's pretty amazing and exciting, isn't it? I think it is. Yeah, I think in the midst of all this heightened anxiety and dysregulation is an opportunity for new levels of consciousness and awareness and reflection and sharing and transcendence and perhaps telepathy and who knows, maybe maybe teleportation is in our near future. I really don't know. My mind says um, there's probably more possible than I can even imagine. And I can imagine quite a bit, and I bet you can too. So that's pretty exciting if you let yourself imagine that for a few. hmm I encourage you to consider that aspect of right and left brain and logic and linear and scientific thinking and the gestalt knowing that is somewhere percolating deep inside you in your each of your cells and throughout this whole universe is like a spark of light that knows everything and that doesn't need that linear part. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, actually. I'm saying when you bring the two together, when you balance them, and it's sort of a continuous process, at least from my perspective, but that bringing together the somatic, the experience, biting into an orange, dancing with your lover, singing that perfect note and hitting it spot on, nailing it. Those moments when we're in flow and reaching just levels that we didn't even imagine we could reach, which happen over and over and over again in our collective history. Um, yeah, I think the more we can open ourselves up to that potential and the more we can recognize that we have the tools already and we can support each other and we can cultivate that in ourselves as individuals. And you can trust that I'm here cultivating that in myself as an individual. And I'm also creating tools and spaces and books and songs and any way that I can think of to help hold a safe space for you to do more of that too. So I'm excited about it. Hey, I want to mention our sponsors, which are my own companies. My book I already mentioned, and if you'd like to be a beta reader in the very near future, or you'd like to pre-purchase, you'd like to give me some feedback, there should be links for that somewhere down there. And also a link to my website where I'm putting all that together as fast as I can. And also a link to my Etsy store or um, my business, Sleeping Dragons Company's Etsy store, where I have some phthalate-free perfumes, fragrances, essential oil blends, and other self-love and creativity supplies like heart-shaped stones, pigments, all sorts of amazing and hard to find things. Right now we're on Etsy. We may or may not bring it back to the bigger website. We've waxed and waned before, but you can find that at sleepingdragonsco.com. And there should be a link to that. And also the Authentic Action Academy, where I'm bringing together parents and teachers and lifelong learners for developing multi-sensory curriculum that brings together old technology and new technology in ways that embraces learning, hands-on learning, not really uh, so much through what's traditionally called failure, but through what I like to call feedback. So trial and error is one way of looking at it, but it's also just, be willing to do things, not with the outcome in mind so much as the learning, the experience. So that's a passion of mine. If you're interested or that's a passion of yours, let's connect. Let's share ideas and grow that. I'm excited to see where that goes in 2025. We're in 2025, y'all. It's a new era. I find this astounding. I don't know about you, but I wasn't always sure we'd make it to here, and it does feel very much like a new era. Today happens to be January 12th, January 12th, 2025, and that is right in the middle of an open portal, astrologically speaking, January 11th and January 13th, which is the full moon. And so I was excited to talk about this topic of consciousness and expansion and awareness because I'm solidifying that for myself in my own journey. And I've had my share of resistance. I've done my share of kicking and screaming. Um, as far as I can tell, it's sort of inevitable, our evolutionary process on an individual level. And so that makes me think that perhaps it's inevitable, that wasn't a word. Uh, Perhaps it happens regardless of or what we do or don't do, but I also think that we might as well do our best to make the best choices that we can. It sure does feel like the right thing to do when I do that, when I bring my consciousness to try to make better choices, to love myself better, really, is what that all boils down to. Then I feel better. So maybe it's all an illusion, but it seems like less suffering feels better. I want to make the distinction that doesn't mean that there's never any pain. Doesn't mean there's no death. Doesn't even mean there's no disease and dysfunction. It just means that less and less do I create a repetitive storyline about how agonizing that is and ramp up like spiral into the despair and the negative story of it, that linear logical retelling of the negative story. When I catch myself doing that, if I can instead interrupt that with like the heartbeat, some rhythm, or perhaps some bubbly laughter, or just maybe a change of state, changing my perspective from either if I'm too far in my body looking out at the horizon, or if I'm out of myself thinking about other things, bringing it back into my body and focusing on the breath. All these are tools that I'm covering in my book, The Shift, and that I want to remind all of us are at our in our literal fingertips and lungs all the time. You have the answers. They're right there inside of you. And anytime um, you don't remember that, just stop on by and I will try to remind you. hmm I'm looking at my notes here to see what else I forgot. I had a student a while back ask me, when does something become history? And I was thinking about how when we write something down, it becomes history, or maybe it's when somebody retells it, or maybe it's, so just a little while ago, I was thinking about doing this, and now I'm getting to the end of it and I've done it. And when I upload it, and by the time you listen to it, it will already be history. Um, mhm. And still at the same time, it's just the present moment right now, whenever you're listening to this. And I hope you will take this moment to just take a breath. And in that breath, take in a little love and breathe out a little love. If we all do that, you can know that everyone else who's listened or listening or ever going to listen to this is going to do the same thing. That's a pretty incredible, powerful thing, isn't it? Let's do it again. Hmm. My joke is pretty crass, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Because life is much too important to take it too seriously. So here's my crass joke. When does a joke become a dad joke? When it leaves you and never comes back. But shh. There you go. Deadpan. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for being you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give me a good review if you feel like it. Mostly stay curious and courageous. And don't forget to love yourself a little bit more. And I hope to see you soon. Ciao for now.